Imagine for a second, what if one of the world's greatest art collections wasn't owned by royalty or a government, but was actually a personal gift to everyone? Well, that's the incredible true story of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. It's a museum that exists because of one single massive act of generosity, created for you, me, and all the American people.
You know, at its opening ceremony back in 1941, the world was on the verge of total war. President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood up and said this wasn't just a building to hold pretty pictures. He said it was a symbol, a powerful statement that no matter what happened, creativity, ideas, and the human spirit would not be extinguished. That's a pretty heavy mission, and it's one that you can still feel in its halls today.
All right, so how did this all come together? Here's what we're going to dive into. First, we'll talk about that incredible gift that started it all. Then, we'll look at the two stunning and stunningly different buildings that house the art. After that, we'll peek inside at some of the absolute must-see masterpieces and see how the gallery keeps changing and growing. And finally, we'll wrap up with how you can plan your own free visit. So, where did this all begin? You might think it was some big government project, but nope. It all started with the vision and the checkbook of one remarkable person.
This is the man, Andrew Mellon. He was a hugely successful financier and the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury. And he looked around at the great capitals of Europe with their world-class museums and thought, hey, why doesn't the United States have one of those? So he decided to just build one himself. He didn't just donate a few paintings. He gave his entire spectacular collection and all the money to construct the original building. To this day, it's one of the biggest private gifts ever made to any country. Just incredible.
So the gallery's journey from just an idea to this icon we see today, well, it took decades. It all became official in 1937 when Congress formally accepted Mellon's amazing gift. Just 4 years later, boom, the magnificent West Building opened its doors. But the story didn't stop there. Almost 40 years later, in 1978, the campus expanded in a huge way with a modern East Building, which really showed that this wasn't a static museum, it was going to keep growing and evolving.
Okay, so let's talk about the buildings themselves, because they aren't just big boxes for holding art. They are works of art. And together, they tell this amazing story about how ideas about architecture changed right through the 20th century. And this shot just says it all. You can see them right there on the National Mall, basically in the backyard of the U.S. Capitol. On the left, you've got the grand, classical West Building, and on the right, you have this sharp, geometric, super modern East Building. I mean, they could not look more different, but somehow they just work together perfectly. And this really breaks down the two completely different philosophies going on here. For the West Building, the architect, John Russell Pope, was looking to the past. He was inspired by the ancient classical grandeur of the Pantheon in Rome. But fast forward a few decades, and the architect for the East Building, the legendary I.M. Pei, wasn't looking at ancient history. His inspiration was the land itself, specifically this awkward trapezoid-shaped plot he had to work with. And right here, this is the spark of genius. This is one of Pei's actual early sketches. You can see how he took that weird trapezoid problem and solved it by just slicing it into two triangles. One big one for the public museum and a smaller one for offices and a study center. And that simple idea, that triangle, became the geometric DNA for the entire building. You see it everywhere, from the giant soaring atrium to the tiniest little details. Okay, but as amazing as the buildings are, the real heart of the gallery is what's inside. We're talking about a collection of over 150,000 works of art. It's just staggering. Obviously, we can't see it all, but let's take a look at a few of the absolute must-see treasures. And we have to start here with the absolute crown jewel. Let this sink in for a second. If you want to see a painting by Leonardo da Vinci in person, anywhere in North or South America, this is it. This is the only one. The hauntingly beautiful portrait of Ginevra da Vinci is more than just a masterpiece. It's a true destination piece. The collection also lets you come, face to face with the artists themselves. And Van Gogh's 1889 self-portrait is, well, it's electric. He painted this just a year before he died, and you can feel all of that raw, turbulent emotion just pouring out of his gaze and in every single one of those swirling brushstrokes. Of course, the gallery is also home to some incredible American masters. Mary Cassatt was a huge part of the Impressionist movement, and she gives us this wonderfully modern portrait. It feels so different from the stuffy, formal paintings of that era. This isn't posed. It's a real, unguarded moment of a kid just being a kid. And it's not all just paintings on walls. When Edgar Degas first showed this sculpture, people were genuinely scandalized. He used a real fabric tutu and a wig made of actual human hair on his wax figure, and that totally blurred the line between what was art and what was reality. At the time, it was shocking. Today, it's one of the most beloved sculptures in the entire world.
You know, from day one, the gallery was meant to be a living institution, not some static, dusty vault for old art. And that means it has to be constantly growing, adapting, and finding new ways to connect with all of us.
And a perfect example of this is the big renovation of the East Building back in 2016. The museum needed way more space for its growing modern art collection. But you can't exactly just add a new wing to an iconic IMP building. So here's the puzzle. What do you do?
And we're not talking about a little bit of space. They needed 12,250 square feet. To put that in perspective, that's like trying to secretly tuck 2.5 basketball courts inside a building that was, for all intents and purposes, already full. It sounds impossible, right?
Well, the solution was absolutely brilliant. The architects didn't go out, they went up. They found these unused service towers, these pods, that were part of Pei's original design. So they opened them up, added new gallery floors inside of them, and then connected them all with this stunning new rooftop sculpture terrace. They found all the space they needed, basically hiding in plain sight. And that living institution idea goes way beyond the architecture. It's all about the programming. This isn't a place where you just have to be quiet and stare at art. They throw these super popular after-hours parties, they offer hands-on workshops, they have free film series, and there's always a new special exhibition coming through. There's always a reason to come back. So by now, you're probably thinking, okay, I need to see this for myself. Well, the best part is it could not possibly be any easier. Here's everything you need to know. First, and most importantly, admission is and has always been completely free. You don't need tickets, you don't need a pass, you just walk in. The gallery's open every single day from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and it's located right on the National Mall. My advice, take public transport. The Archives metro stop is just a short walk away. So it all started with one man's vision to give the nation a museum that could stand with any in the world. Today, it holds a collection of priceless treasures that belong to every single one of us. The only question left is, when you walk through those doors, what masterpiece is waiting for you to discover?